What's up, boys? It's Nick from Team Table 501 here, king of the scrubs, and today I'm bringing you my brand new, well, not brand new deck tech, but updated deck tech for my mono white vehicles deck for Rivals of Ixalan Standard. The bannings have very much helped the power level of this deck, and has brought it to a much more viable contender. While you could beat the Teamer Energy deck, you couldn't do it very consistently because of cards like Rogue Refiner. Those were just really good blockers against your 2/2 and 3/1 creatures that you weren't able to get in profitable amounts of damage. And Attune with Aether meant cards like Roller Virtuoso and Bristling Hydra were just really hard for your deck to grind through, because while you have answers to those cards are either going to protect themselves or make chump blockers against your go-wide aggro deck. And against Ramanop Red, while you do have 8 sources of main deck life gain, Rampaging Ferocidon is the card that naturally just beats your deck, because Menace means it's pretty much impossible for you to block with your one giant robot. Players can't gain life means those 8 sources of life gain have been mitigated, and every time a creature, which you are a token deck, so you're going to get hit for a lot of damage off of the Ferocidon, that card was just the natural enemy of this deck. And Ramanop Runes you didn't really care about until you were at a life total where you had to care about it. But the bannings did really help this deck. The new set, while it did give this deck a few playable cards, it didn't really do much to change the way the deck works. You're still an aggro deck. You're still this is essentially standard affinity. So, if you have the cards, I highly recommend playing this deck. It's a ton of fun. I'm testing it for my PPTQ in 2 weeks, or I guess a week and a half now. But this is a deck I'm considering, and more than likely the deck I will be playing at the PPTQ. But enough rambling. I will have the deck list in the description down below. You can go check out the link there. The link to my Twitter will be in the description down below. Go follow that shit, because I post a bunch of fun stuff on there. And that's about it. Just for a small little update, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Content will return after Extreme Force has had a chance to hit the metagame, and I can figure out where I need to build Monarchs, because I've been testing Fluffles a lot. Really been enjoying Fluffles. I think it's one of the better rogue decks, but I'll talk about that in a different video. For now, we're talking about Magic. And so this is the deck tech for mono white vehicles. We're going to start off with the mana base. It is 22 lands, 4 copies of Sheffet Dunes. This is really good because you're a go wide deck, so you want to be able to try to kill them as quickly as you can. And going wide means this card makes your 1/1s into 2/2s, your 3/1s into 4/2s. The thing is that it doesn't boost your vehicles unless you crew them. So this is a card that can either increase the amount of damage you can do, or it mitigates the amount of damage you can do. You have to figure out when the correct time is to crack this. 2 copies of Field of Ruin, because blowing up non-basics is fun. 1 Inventor's Fair to tutor artifacts and gain life. 1 Scavenger Grounds as Graveyard Hate, and 1 Arch of Araska. This card is really good against control decks, as it gives you essentially 5 mana draw a card every single turn. And this deck can hit Ascend on turn 4. So just having this as your land drop for turn and then hit Ascend, meaning you can draw a card on the next turn, is really helpful in games where you're going to hit them into late game and you run out of cards in hand. And then I play 13 basic planes. And that does it for the mana base. 22 lands. It does feel like there are some games where you don't have enough lands, and there are other games where it's too many. So I think 22 is the correct number for now. It may change after the PPTQ. For creatures, 4 copies of Toolcraft Exemplar. This is essentially Wild Nakanal in this deck. And people constantly forget that if you have 3 or more artifacts, this gains first strike until end of turn. Very, very powerful in this format, because all of these tribal decks are really good at playing bears. They're really good at playing 2/2s for 2 and 3/3s for 3. And those cards do not beat first strike. So essentially you get in with your first strike creature. You've essentially given it menace to an extent, because your opponent doesn't want to spend just 1 creature. Or your opponent doesn't want to throw a creature in front of it for it to essentially be a chump block. They want to kill it, meaning they have to put 2 creatures in front of it, so that first strike kills 1, and then it kills the other with regular combat damage. The card is amazing. You got to play 4 of it. And if you hit 3 power, just so you know, little trick. This hits 3 power at the beginning of your combat step, not declare attackers. So if you have a Heart of Kiran, you can go to combat and trigger the Exemplar, and then use it to crew the Heart of Kiran before you declare an attack. So that's a little trick that you should know if you play the deck. But I'm pretty sure most people know that interaction by now. 4 Glorybound Initiate. I was testing Sacred Cat for the longest time, and Sacred Cat is a unplayable Magic card, and here's why. Sacred Cat is a card that looks appealing. It's a 1/1 for 1 with lifelink, and you can embalm it for 1. The problem with a card like that is that it is one of the worst possible top decks your deck can generate. This card is basically always live, as it has 3 power, meaning it can crew almost all of the vehicles in the deck by itself. There's a couple that it doesn't, but it can crew the most. And the exerting on this is relevant when you need to push in a huge amount of damage. Turning this into a 4/4 is super powerful, as it dodges all the 3 damage-based removal spells that exist in the format if they don't kill it before you declare your attack. And as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, Exert is not a trigger that goes on the stack. It's an ability that resolves as the creature is attacking. So I do not believe that this can get hit with removal in response. I may be wrong, though. 3 SRAM. I love SRAM. He's an amazing card, but because he's legendary, you can't play 4 in this deck, which is unfortunate, but anything that says draw a card is playable. And then 3 Fairgrounds Warden. We gotta exile Hazarats. We gotta exile Scarab Gods. We need to have answers in our deck, and this is a really solid answer. And it can crew vehicles, which is pretty important. And the 3 Toughness means it requires a bigger removal spell. Like, it's not gonna die to Shock or Magma Spray. 14 creatures. Onto the non-creature spells. We're playing 4 Servo Exhibition, 4 SRAM's Expertise. Servo Exhibition is what makes your Toolcraft Exemplar busted. If you don't have a Heart of Kiran, just essentially you can get in for 3 and you have 2 blockers on your turn, which is rather nice. And the SRAM's Expertise is one of the best top decks the deck has. You know, you're essentially paying 4 mana for 3 power and is potentially a free spell. So essentially going this into this, you spent 4 mana for essentially a 5/5. And that is no joke. That is a serious amount of combat damage that's on your board. I've replaced the Desert's Hold with 2 copies of Baffling End. This is a card that when I first saw it, did not think it would have room in the deck, but this card is insane. This card is dumb. Like, the fact that it's just hard removal is nice, and game 1, most people don't have enchantment removal in their deck. Like, if they want to waste a cast out on the Baffling End just so that they get a 3/3 token, be my fucking guest, but this card is ridiculously powerful. This card is ridiculously good. Even though it can't hit the big creatures like Hazaret and Scarab God, it doesn't matter. This is another 2 mana removal spell that the deck needs. Then I'm still playing 2 cast out because you gotta deal with Planeswalkers, you gotta deal with, like, enchantments. Anointed Procession is a card that is just really, really good against your deck because it means your opponent gets to go wider than you do. So being able to answer the Anointed Procession is really nice. And the cycling is not bad either. Now we're on to the vehicles. 4 Heart of Kiran. You gotta play this card. This is the card you always want to be playing on turn 2, regardless of whether or not you have Toolcraft Exemplar. So playing this card is necessary. And then the best card in the deck is 4 Aethersphere Harvester. This card is nuts. Like, this card, it has always been sideboard playable, but this is by far the best card in the entire deck. The crew 1 is a fucking joke. You can crew it with a goddamn servo token, alright? And the 5 Toughness means it can block cards like Glorybringer. It can block just really annoying flyers like Siren Storm Tamer. It can block cards like that Pirate Siren bitch that taps your guys. It just sucks that Hostage Taker is a card, although it isn't really seeing much play at the moment, so you don't have to worry about it. But still, this card is just super effective. Mostly Glorybringer is the card that's really annoying because of the damage it can deal. But because the Glorybringer trigger happens before you declare your blockers, Aethersphere Harvester is essentially always going to live if it blocks a Glorybringer if they don't waste a removal spell, essentially 2-for-1ing themselves to an extent, but not really. But you're essentially saying, hey, need a removal spell or I'm blocking the 4 damage. And the lifelink is always nice. And then the biggest robot of them all, Peace Walker Colossus. This is one of the better top decks. This is a card you'd much rather just play on turn 3. But this card's nuts. Like, this card is just big. It's a 6/6. And yes, while crew 4 is annoying, you have to remember, this is a go-wide deck. You can make a ton of tokens and just crew this thing. SRAM's Expertise into Servo Exhibition is a way to do it. Or you can have Glorybound Initiate because it's 3 power. You can have it and a Servo token crew it, which is rather nice. So, and the fact that it can just, like, essentially, if you get to 5 lands, you can play this, activate its ability targeting, say, a Heart of Kiran, and the Heart of Kiran essentially deals 4 damage for free, and you still have creatures to crew it on your turn to, or on your opponent's turn to block. So, Peace Walker is by far probably one of the better cards in the deck. So 60 in the main. I don't really know if there's any cards I would play over this list. I think I have the list pretty much figured out. Leave your suggestions in the comments. I'll be more than willing to answer or listen to them or answer any questions you have. Obviously, we have the Foil Energy token and then a shit ton of servos because that's all that this deck does. For the sideboard, 3 copies of Master Trinketeer. So this is essentially for the control matchup where Fairgrounds Warden is a completely dead card, because you don't want to exile a Gearhulk or a Scarab God with it. So you switch out your Fairgrounds Warden for these cards, and they essentially just help you win the game, because if you go SRAM's Expertise into this card, you've essentially generated 9 power for 4 mana, which is ridiculous. Like, assuming that the Master Trinketeer doesn't just die immediately, that is almost half of your opponent's life total. That's nuts. And this is a 3 CMC creature. They have to Revolt a Fatal Push to kill it. Now, yeah, the 2 toughness means it's pretty unplayable against red, but against decks like Blue-Black Control or Blue-White Control, they have a really hard time answering this card without Fumigate. So, 2 Fragmentize to deal with Cast Out, Ixalan's Binding, Anointed Procession. That's really the card you want to hit with this, is Anointed Procession. That is a card that can just beat you if you don't blow it up. It can hit vehicles in, say, a Mardu Vehicles matchup, or just against Tamer Energy when they board in their Aether Harvesters. So, or anything like tribal artifacts and enchantments, you can hit those. Radiant Destiny comes to mind. 3 Authority of the Councils. Mono red is still a deck, so as long as it's a deck, this card will be in the sideboard. Just end of discussion. 2 Solemnity. This is kind of for energy, but not really. Grixis Energy is the best deck at the moment, and that deck doesn't really lose to this card. It just hampers the deck, which is what you're trying to do. You just want your opponent to be weakened so that your cards are just better than theirs. But this is mostly here for the blue-green Merfolk deck that has been rising in popularity, along with Constrictor. Those are 2 decks that don't really care about you going wide because they're just going to have big, bulky creatures that can block almost anything you have if you don't get a fast presence in the air. And this card helps you mitigate some of that damage. All their creatures won't get counters. They don't have to worry about anything, really. Like, you just don't have to worry about anything. And it's randomly just good against Tamer Energy and stuff like that, so... and then 2 Gideon's Intervention. Approach of the Second Son is a really annoying deck. Like, I have no problems with the deck, personally. I really like playing the deck, but it is a deck that if you don't deal with it, it's just going to beat you. So this card, it can name Approach and shut off their win condition, but most Approach players aren't stupid. They always have ways to sideboard into creature win conditions, like Regal Caracal, Torrential Gearhulk, Sunscorched Champion. I've seen some builds go to Gideon of the Trials for a win condition, but naming Approach against decks like Red-White Approach, or I've seen some Black-White Approach lists that have been somewhat popular. But having an out to that, and it's also really good against Hazoret. This card's really, really good against Hazoret. And against just rogue decks, but mostly for Approach. 2 Sentinel Totem in the sideboard. Not only is this an artifact, so Exemplar triggers on your combat, this is another graveyard answer. And it lets you scry when it enters the battlefield, so it essentially draws you a card by putting the card on top or on the bottom of your deck, depending on if you want to draw it or not. And then the last card in the sideboard is the One of Sky Sovereign. The deck has a really hard time dealing with Planeswalkers. This is another answer to Planeswalkers. And this is another just big flyer that gets crewed really easily. Like, the Crew 3 is really easy to do when you have Glorybound Initiate in your deck. It's laughable how easy it is to trigger this guy. And while it is 5 mana, you're going to have a hard time getting to it. When you get to it, it is really good. This is one of the main ways the deck dealt with Rampaging Ferocidon, as this did not trigger it, so you wouldn't take damage. It also bolted it, so it would die. But And again, this is just a huge thing in the air that if they don't answer it, they die. So that is it for the Mono White Vehicles deck tech for Rivals of Ixalan Standard. Again, this video is rather long. I'm sorry about that. But there are some people who just don't know what the deck does, so I felt like I should explain what the cards do. And this is just a deck, I've had a ton of fun playing it. I really enjoy this deck. Even though it's not a control deck, it can play like a control deck. And that's what I love about it, is it has a ton of flexibility in what it can do because it can either be aggressive or hold back a board state because you just spam tokens. So that is rather nice. Again, link to the deck list in the description, link to my Twitter in the description. Let me know what you think about it. Let me know what you want to see on the channel. If you want to see a Fluffle deck profile, let me know. I may just upload it anyways because the deck is really good. The deck is insanely good, actually, but that's about going to do it from me. I will have a video uploading my PPTQ results, so stay notified for that. And that's going to do it for me. My name is Nick from Team Table 501. Thanks for watching, and get good, scrubs. I'll see you next time.